Welcome to this explainer on the surprising power of atomic habits. Today we're diving deep into the undeniable math and, honestly, the fascinating psychology behind how tiny, everyday changes compound into truly remarkable results. If you've ever felt like your efforts to improve just aren't moving the needle, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get right into it.
Let's start things off with a bit of a mystery. For 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. In fact, their performance was so notoriously underwhelming that top European bike manufacturers literally refused to sell them gear. They were actually terrified it would hurt their brand. To add to that, British cyclists had secured only a single solitary Olympic gold medal since 1908. They were basically trapped in a century of total mediocrity.
But, that all changed in 2003. A man named Dave Brailsford was hired as the new performance director, and he brought with him this revolutionary philosophy. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains. The core idea here was radically simple. You just search for a tiny 1% margin of improvement in absolutely everything you do. Break down every single thing that goes into riding a bike, improve it by just 1%, and eventually you're going to see a massive leap in overall performance.
And Brailsford's team? They relentlessly pursued these microscopic advantages. They started with the obvious stuff, right? Redesigning bike seats for comfort, rubbing alcohol on the tires for better grip. But they absolutely didn't stop there. This perfectly illustrates the depth of their commitment. They had riders wear electrically heated overshorts just to maintain ideal muscle temperature. They even hired a surgeon to teach the team the absolute best way to wash their hands to avoid catching a cold. Oh, and they painted the inside of the team truck white. Why? Literally just to spot tiny bits of dust that could mess up the finely tuned mechanics of the bikes. It's crazy.
So, what happened? Well, the result of all these tiny accumulated adjustments was absolutely staggering. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team went to the 2008 Beijing Olympics and captured an astounding 60% of the available gold medals. 60%! They completely dominated the sport, going from the absolute bottom of the barrel to setting world records and snagging 5 Tour de France victories in just a 6-year span.
Now let's unpack the math behind this incredible turnaround, starting with the immense, almost mysterious significance of the number 37. I know, it might seem like a totally random number, but it's actually the mathematical key to understanding self-improvement.
If you can manage to get just 1% better each day for one single year, the compound interest of self-improvement means you don't just get a little bit better. You end up nearly 37 times better by the time you're done. On the flip side, if you get 1% worse each day, you decline almost all the way down to zero. Habits are literally the compound interest of self-improvement. They seem to make almost zero difference on any given day, but the impact over months and years, it's enormous.
Think of it kind of like shifting the route of an airplane by just 3.5 degrees at takeoff. If you're a pilot leaving Los Angeles for New York City and you adjust your heading 3.5 degrees south, the nose of the plane moves just a few feet. It's a barely noticeable change in the moment. But you magnify that across the entire United States and you end up landing in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. A super slight change in your daily habits guides your life to a completely different destination.
So if the math is so clear and undeniably on our side, why in the world do we fail so often? Well, imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in a really cold room. You can actually see your breath. The room is 25 degrees. You heat it up degree by degree. 26, 27, 29, 31, and nothing happens. The ice cube is exactly the same. Then it hits 32 degrees. Suddenly the ice begins to melt. A single 1-degree shift, seemingly no different from all the temperature increases before it, unlocked a massive, undeniable change.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. When you're putting in all that hard work and feeling like you're seeing absolutely zero results, you have to remember the ice cube. The effort you put in during those early stages isn't wasted at all. Actually, it's just being stored. It's building up the potential required to unleash a major breakthrough. People might eventually call you an overnight success, but you know it was those months of unrewarded, silent work that made the jump possible.
And this brings us directly to a huge psychological hurdle. Why is it so incredibly hard to build habits that actually last long enough to see these exponential results? Why do we always seem to give up right at 31 degrees?
Well, it happens because of a major mismatch in our expectations. We almost always expect progress to be linear, right? We want to put in a day's work and see exactly a day's worth of results. But in reality, the most powerful outcomes of any compounding process are always delayed.
Because of this massive gap between expectation and reality, we inevitably plunge straight into what's known as the valley of disappointment. We feel like we're going absolutely nowhere, so we just quit. To survive this valley, we really need the patience of a stonecutter. In fact, the San Antonio Spurs hang a quote about a stonecutter in their locker room just to remind them of this exact concept. You have to understand that mastery requires hammering away at your rock, just chipping away at the plateau of latent potential without seeing any immediate cracks. It's the 101st blow that finally splits the rock, but it was only made possible by the 100 invisible blows that came before it.
Getting through that plateau, though, requires a massive paradigm shift in your daily life. You need to completely forget about setting goals. Seriously? Instead, you need to focus exclusively on building systems.
Think of the distinction kind of like this. Goals are simply about the results you want to achieve. Systems, on the other hand, are the actual daily processes that lead to those results. If you're a coach, your goal is obviously the championship, but your system is how you recruit, manage, and practice. If you're a musician, the goal is playing that complex new piece, but the system is your daily practice routine. Basically, the goal is your destination, but the system is the journey.
This actually brings up a really fascinating question. If you completely ignored your goal and focused solely on your system, would you still succeed? Well, as three-time Super Bowl winning coach Bill Walsh brilliantly noted, the score takes care of itself. If you ignore the scoreboard and just focus on running the absolute best practice system every single day, the wins are naturally going to follow.
In fact, relying solely on goals creates 4 distinct problems that can actually hinder your long-term progress. Let's break down exactly why goals can be so problematic.
Problem number 1, winners and losers have the exact same goals. This is a classic case of survivorship bias. Think about it. Every single Olympian at the starting line wants to win the gold medal. Every candidate applying for a job wants the job. If successful and unsuccessful people share the exact same objective, then the goal itself cannot possibly be what magically differentiates the winners from the losers. It's their system of continuous, small improvements that actually separates them.
Second, achieving a goal only changes your life for a single moment. Imagine you've got a really messy room. If you summon a sudden burst of motivation and clean it, boom, you achieved your goal. But if you don't change the underlying sloppy habits, the system, that led to the mess in the first place, you're going to be staring at a new pile of clutter by next week. You just treated a symptom without ever addressing the root cause. If you fix the inputs, the outputs will literally fix themselves.
Furthermore, a goals-first mentality totally restricts your happiness. You end up constantly telling yourself, oh, once I achieve X, then I'll be happy. You're constantly pushing joy into the future. But when you fall in love with the process, the system itself, you allow yourself to be satisfied any time your system is running. And without a good system, you fall victim to the yo-yo effect. You see people train for months for a marathon. They cross the finish line, and then they just stop running altogether because the goal is gone. Systems are what keep you playing the game indefinitely.
And all of this leads us to the ultimate solution, the atomic habit. Now, an atomic habit isn't just a tiny change for the sake of being small. It's actually a fundamental building block of a much larger system of compound growth. Just like atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the tiny routines that build upon each other to fuel remarkable, world-changing results.
So please remember this. If you're struggling to break a bad habit right now, or maybe trying to start a good one, the problem isn't you. You do not lack willpower or capability. You simply have the wrong system for change. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
I want to leave you with a thought to carry into the rest of your day. Stop obsessing over your current results. Are you a millionaire right now? Are you out of shape? Honestly, it doesn't matter nearly as much as the path you're currently walking. Ask yourself this today. Are the atomic habits you're performing right now putting you on the correct trajectory to become who you want to be? Thank you so much for watching this explainer, and we'll see you next time.